In this lecture, we will explore the sociological idea of social capital. Social capital is indeed one of the longest living concepts in the discipline of sociology, and also it is one of the most ambiguous concepts. Some sociologists doubt the usefulness of this concept because it can be very broad and even amorphous. Social capital goes against the economic idea of human behavior. Economists think that this society is run by calculative individuals who act accordingly to market principles, only to make the maximum benefits by choosing the right action. Is this true? Social capital as a sociological idea suggests that human action can be influenced by something else than just economic calculation. What is social capital? It is simply a different name for human network. It includes a wide range of networks we have. It includes informal connections such as friendship, neighbors, or even a guy you run into at the Starbucks every morning and say hi to. It also includes formal organizational ties such as your classmates in this Soch 100 class, your colleagues at work, or your membership to a political party or environmental group. If social capital simply refers to social network, why do we have to use the term capital? Well, there is a reason for it. Let's think about the concept of capital to begin with. When you get a certain amount of money capital, what do you do with it? You just don't drink it away on a Saturday night, obviously. With monetary capital, you invest it so that it hopefully increases in value someday. Social capital stems from the same thinking. It is an idea that social network has value and will bring you other benefit other than the relationship itself by applying it in the right way. Also, just like monetary capital, not everybody owns the same amount of social capital. The word capital, therefore, also insinuates the unequal nature of its distribution. Some of us might have a lot more of the good kinds of social capital than others, and how much of good kinds of social capital one owns determines one's life chances. Sociologists have identified two different kinds of social capital, bonding and bridging. Let's take a look at how we can distinguish the two kinds of social capital. Bonding social capital is sometimes called the getting by social capital because you need it on everyday basis. Members within the same bonding social capital share more similarities than differences. Bonding social capital reinforces the commonality and exclusive identities among the members. It is also an emotional, therefore strong kinds of tie too. Bonding social capital is also informal. It is not structured in a bureaucratic way. It relies on people's willingness to maintain the tie rather than the formal rules and obligations. There are a couple of examples of bonding social capital, such as friendship, family members, neighborhood, and also all sorts of hobby and activity clubs, and also ethnic fraternities and ethnic churches might qualify as a good example of bonding social capital. On the contrary, bridging social capital is coined as the getting ahead social capital. It brings people from different backgrounds, and it oftentimes has a more bureaucratic structure to pursue formal goals. It is not the emotional ties and more instrumental in achieving collective goals. It is easy for you to remember these two kinds of social capital as opposite to each other in nature. For example, political parties, NGOs such as Environmental California, Greenpeace, or something like the Obama Support Group might qualify as good examples of bridging social capital. Both kinds of social capital matters for the welfare of society. Imagine a society where there's only bonding social capital and very little bridging social capital. What would the place look like? If you imagine this situation in terms of racial groups, it will be a place where white people are only hanging out with other white people, Asians are only with other Asians, and Latinos exclusively associate with other Latinos. It will be a very balkanized society, obviously not a very ideal place to live. Imagine we have only bridging social capital. What would the place look like then? It would be a place where people have no emotional, tight connection with others, and they simply perform bureaucratic formal tasks in the organizations they belong to. Not a very healthy society either. Obviously, we need a good mixture of both kinds of social capital to make an ideal society. There are two ways to understand the benefits social capital brings to us. The first way to think about it is its private benefit. This is a very simple story. Your connection gets you jobs, promotion, and maybe a girlfriend or boyfriend. Most of elite engineers and CEOs, when looking for the second job, not the first job, they use their connections to look for a job. They do not apply for a formal job posting on the Craigslist, for example. Some sociologists, for this reason, argue that having the right social capital, knowing the right person, matters much more than your education and diploma. If you follow this thinking, going to a good school is supposed to be very beneficial, not only for the value that the diploma itself brings to us, or the knowledge you get from excellent teachers, but also because you gain connections with people who will assume important positions in the future. Let's do a very quick quiz. From what you have learned from bridging and bonding social capital, which type of social capital, bridging or bonding, is more helpful in getting a promotion at work? The answer is bridging social capital. In order to maximize your chances of success, to get a better job or to climb up the corporate ladder, bridging social capital is way more crucial. By having only bonding social capital, you are stuck with people of the similar kind to yourself in terms of economic and social status. If you aim to get out of the status quo, what you need is bridging social capital, literally to bridge you out from the group you are already in. The second way social capital is beneficial to us is its public benefit. Robert Putnam, who wrote the book Bowling Alone, is a political scientist. As a political scientist, his main concern is to look at how social capital makes a community as a whole a better or worse place. In other words, social capital can be a collective property, not only an individual asset. In the following slides, we will focus exclusively on the public aspects of social capital. In fact, communities can look very different depending on the amount of social capital it has. In fact, Putnam argued that streets and houses look different too depending on the amount of social capital the community owns. Let's compare two communities with high and low social capital. In high social capital community, people do have personal connections and acquaintance. They do things together, be it block parties or neighborhood soccer team. They enjoy getting together and do things collectively. In low social capital scenario, people are not connected to each other at all. Maybe people move in and out all the time. They don't know each other's names. They prefer spending time alone or in front of TV instead of hanging out with their neighbors. If you look around the Bay Area, if you have been to downtown Hollister or Willow Glen around Halloween, the streets and houses are very lively lit with Halloween decorations and ornaments. Usually more decorations of the house, more kids going around for trick and treat are good indicators that the community has a high social capital. The opposite example would be a place with iron bars in windows. Besides the crime rate, the bars show the low amount of trust among the residents, therefore low social capital. Here's one caveat. Social capital may not coincide with the wealth of the community per se. For example, East Palo Alto in the 1960s was poor, but they had very vibrant African American and Pacific Islanders communities. They had high trust and reciprocity amongst each other and helped each other to go through economic hardship. Likewise, the new gated communities down in San Jose have $1 million houses up on the hills, but it's possible that the neighbors have very weak connections with each other. Relative prevalence of each type of social capital can categorize societies into 4 different types. In the upper right corner, high bridging and high bonding social capital situation is obviously the best case scenario. American and Swedish societies, for example, are considered high bridging and high bonding societies. These societies are mature democratic society where people are well connected through formal institutions while preserving their intimate ties such as neighborhood communities and a family and church affiliations. Lower right, high bonding and low bridging is common in closed and exclusive village communities, such as Amish communities, rural communities in Midwest, or even immigrant communities in Central Valley. People have very tight bonds amongst each other, but they don't trust outsiders, and they might be even isolated from the rest of the society. Because of their unique creed, as in the case of Amish, or because of the existence of discrimination, and etc. In the upper left corner, high bridging and low bonding can be seen in a place of recent development, such as a big city in China. People migrate from rural areas, and since they are not rooted in the metropolitan areas yet, they lack bonding. However, economic opportunities abound. A lot of foreign money comes in and jobs are booming. This kind of society might fail to give people a sense of belonging and can be very weak in bonding social capital. In the lower left corner, low bonding and low bridging situation, this is actually a very rare situation because without bonding or bridging, society is technically impossible because there is no ties amongst the people at all. This can be found in a very limited situation such as civil war and extreme civil unrest, such as in Uganda, in the tribal conflict situation. According to Putnam, social capital is important to the well-functioning of the community because it fosters reciprocity. There are 2 kinds of reciprocity that Putnam mentioned in the book. Specific reciprocity is based on an economic calculation, where the individual does a favor to someone else only because he expects a reward of the same value in a relatively short term. We do this all the time. You give a ride to your friend expecting that your friend will buy you lunch next time. Generalized reciprocity, on the other hand, is a transaction between the individual and the community, where the individual does good to the community expecting that anyone would do the same in his shoe without expecting any concrete returns. Examples would be watching out for someone else's kids on the neighborhood street. You do that not because you expect some reward for doing that, but because you simply care about the neighborhood safety and well-being of the children in your neighborhood. Evidently, we practice both kinds of reciprocity. Putnam argues, though, that for the welfare of community, generalized reciprocity is the most important one. If everybody practices only specific reciprocity, no one does any favor to people unless there is a tangible likelihood of return and rewards. We would be acting very rationally and calculatively and also very selfishly. Generalized reciprocity can mobilize the goodwill of many more people who are willing to invest the efforts and time for the public good. U.S. states are pretty divergent in the amount of social capital. In this map, the darker the shade is, the higher the amount of social capital of each state. For how Putnam measured the amount of social capital in each state, it is part of the article summary due this week. The southern states are in general depleted in social capital, as well as in Nevada with a big white blank spot. Canadian voters are particularly high in social capital, as shown in the darker shades in the map, and New England states are also very high. Putnam explained that southern states are traditionally low in social capital because of the legacy of slavery. Slavery was a system designed to destroy trust and ties between black and white communities. Putnam argues that there is still significant effects from slavery that diminishes the amount of social capital in southern states. On the other hand, North Dakota and Minnesota's high social capital is explained by their demographics. These states are populated by Scandinavian immigrants who brought over their culture of strong civil culture from back home. Putnam applied the same explanation for the New England states. One of the biggest contributions of Putnam's book is that he showed social capital indeed has strong correlation with the quality of lives of people living in the community. For example, look at the table on page 303. This table shows that if you plot social capital and the TV watching of each U.S. state amongst children, you can establish a nice correlation line like this. North Dakota children with a high social capital watches very little TV, while low social capital Mississippi children spend a lot of time in front of the screen. Considering that TV watching time greatly correlates with children's success at school, social capital has a strong effect on academic success of children. Utah is the only outlier here. Utah, with a medium amount of social capital, is very low in TV watching. There are other factors besides social connectedness obviously here, such as the presence of strong church, which may explain this. Next week in the class meeting, we will discuss more on how exactly social capital affects the quality of lives of people in education, economy, safety of neighborhood, and health.